Oh, hello there, and welcome to Phil Talking D20. So, today's video is sponsored by Jurassic Park. It's not at all, that's a nonsense. It's actually crunch time. Oh yeah, I use the word crunch. Why? Because we are looking at encounter building, and we're doing 5e versus 2e in the Battle of the Crunch. Now, the reason I use crunch so liberally is because I hear the word crunch. It's a great word. Used a lot when talking about Pathfinder. Oh yeah, but it's crunchy. Oh yeah, but you can't do it, it's too crunchy. So I thought, let's do a like for like on rules versus rules to see who truly is the crunchiest. Now, we're doing encounter building because one of the most fundamental and important jobs of a dungeon master is to create encounters. It's bread and butter. You have to do it. You can't go for an entire campaign and not run at least one or maybe two combats in some sessions, sometimes more, sometimes less, but you're going to have to do some encounter building. Now, we're starting with 5e. Strap in. So, the first thing we do is, to quote, evaluate our encounter difficulty. And we start with part 1. Determine XP thresholds. First, determine the experience point XP thresholds for each character in the party. The XP threshold by character level table below has 4 XP thresholds for each character level. One for each category of encounter difficulty. Use a character's level to determine his or her XP thresholds. Repeat this process for every character in the party. Ooh, exciting. It goes on. Step 2. Now we have to determine the party's XP threshold. Thrilling. For each category of encounter difficulty, add up the character's XP thresholds. This determines the party's XP threshold. You'll end up with 4 totals, one for each category of encounter difficulty. For example, if your party includes 3 third-level characters and 1 second-level character, the party's total XP thresholds would be as follows. 275 XP for easy, 75 plus 75 plus 75 plus 50 to reach that total. Medium would be 550 XP, 150, 150, 150, 100. And so on. Hard, 825. Deadly, 1400. Now, that's obviously one specific example for their little breakdown, and there is a little table that's called XP thresholds by character level. Who doesn't love a table? And it goes first level, 25, 50, 75, 100. Record the totals because you can use them for every encounter in your adventure. So that's good. You're prepping it once, you're writing it down. If they're staying at that kind of level, you've always got a note of it. Bit chunky, bit crunchy. That's just how it is. Now, step 3. Total the monster's XP. Add up the XP for all the monsters in the encounter. Every monster has an XP value in its stat block. This is a fundamental difference between the two systems. 5e has a ever-increasing XP threshold for the next level. So it's like ever-increasing numbers, and you're always counting up, and you're always staying and just constantly going up. So that you will have to keep hitting bigger and bigger and bigger numbers that become quite obscure and quite random, the higher up you go above level 1, to the point where they get to really high volumes of XP required to breach into higher levels. Pathfinder 2, however, uses a flat 1000 XP and resets it to 0 when you complete a level, instantly making your life easier. Chalk 1 for 2e on that little front, but that's an aside. So now we have to find our total monster XP and add it all up. Every monster has an XP value in its stat block. Part 4. Modify total XP for multiple monsters. If an encounter includes more than one monster, apply a multiplier to the monster's total XP. The more monsters there are, the more attack rolls you're making against characters in a given round, and the more dangerous the encounter becomes. To correctly gauge an encounter's difficulty, multiply the total XP of all the monsters in the encounter by the value given in the encounter multipliers table, table number 2. For example, if an encounter includes 4 monsters worth a total of 500 XP, you would multiply the total of the monsters by 2 for an adjusted value of 1000 XP. This adjusted value is not what the monsters are worth in terms of XP. Why? You just made me do all those maths. The adjusted value's only purpose is to help you accurately assess the encounter's difficulty. So they're not going to get that. They're just going to have that little carrot. The DM's going to do that maths, and he's going to get big numbers, but he's not going to give it to the party. Fine, okay, I can accept that. We're moving on. The adjusted value's only purpose is to accurately assess the encounter's difficulty. When making this calculation, don't count any monsters whose challenge rating is significantly below the average challenge rating of the other monsters in the group, unless you think the weak monster significantly contribute to the difficulty of the encounter. It's getting complicated. Encounter multipliers. Number of monsters, 1. Multiplier, times 1. Good to know. 2 monsters, 1.5 multiplier. 3 to 6 monsters, 2 times multiplier. Number of monsters, 7 to 10. 2.5 on the old XP multiplication game. 11 to 14 times 3, obscure, I know. 15 or more times 4. It rhymes. That's probably the only reason they picked it. Step 5. Compare XP. Compare the monster's adjusted, not their actual, the adjusted XP value to the party. The adjusted being the amount of XP you're not going to give to the party. The threshold that equals the adjusted XP value determines the encounter's difficulty. If there's no match, use the closest threshold that is lower than the adjusted XP value. Slightly lost at this point, but we're moving on. Now, it jumps to a big side box here that says challenge rating. When putting together an encounter or adventure, especially at lower levels, exercise caution when using monsters whose challenge rating is higher than the party's average level. Such a creature might deal enough damage with a single action to take out adventurers of lower levels. For example, an ogre classic monster has a challenge rating of 2. But it can kill a first level wizard with a single blow, and many have. In addition, some monsters have features that might be difficult or impossible for lower level characters to overcome. For example, a Rakasha has a challenge rating of 13 and is immune to spells of 6th level or lower. Spellcasters of 12th level or lower have no spells higher than 6th level, meaning that there's many levels, meaning that they won't be able to affect the Rakasha with their magic at all, putting the adventurer at a serious disadvantage. They've got a crossbow. It's not, yeah, they're screwed. That's what we're saying there, politely. Such an encounter would be significantly tougher for the party than the monster's challenge rating might suggest. Perhaps the challenge rating should have been adjusted to take that into account. Just say, maybe that should have been the case. Moving on. We're now going into, hang on, no, we're going to have further numbers thrown at us for step 5. So we're jumping back to this compare XP. For example, an encounter with 1 bugbear and 3 hobgoblins has an adjusted XP value of 1000, making it a hard encounter for a party of 3 third level characters and 1 second level character, which has a hard encounter threshold of 825 and a deadly encounter threshold of 1400 XP. Oh, okay, so it's over the hard, but it's under the deadly. So we're just going to say it's hard, except it's not. It's hardly, if we combine hard and deadly. It's a hardly encounter. Party size. We're still going. Bear with me. The preceding guidelines assume that you have a party consisting of 3 to 5 adventurers. If the party consists of fewer than 3 characters, apply the next highest multiplier on the encounter multiplier in the encounter multipliers table. For an example, apply a multiplier of 1.5 when a character fights a single monster, and a multiplier of 5 for groups of 15 or more monsters. It's a bit of a jump, but I get what they're saying. They're basically telling you to push it up a threshold if you've got fewer members of the party. If the party contains 6 or more characters, use the next lowest multiplier on the table. For such encounters, treat each discrete part... Oh, hang on a second. No. Multi-part. Sorry, I skipped ahead. We're on to multi-part encounters. Sometimes an encounter features multiple enemies that the party doesn't face all at once. For example, monsters might come at the party in waves. For such encounters, treat each discrete part or wave as a separate encounter for the purposes of determining its difficulty. Wise words. A party can't benefit from a short rest between parts of a multi-part encounter, so they won't be able to spend hit dice to regain hit points or recover any abilities that require a short rest to regain. As a rule, if the adjusted XP value of the monster in a multi-part encounter is higher than 1/3 of the party's XP total for the adventuring day, see table the adventuring day, the encounter is going to be tougher than the sum of its parts. Slightly vague. But I get what they're getting at. I see where they're alluding to. Building encounters on a budget. You can build an encounter if you know its desired difficulty. The party's XP thresholds that you've worked out many times give you a budget that you can spend on monsters to build easy, medium, hard, and deadly encounters. Just remember that groups of monsters eat up more of that budget than their base XP would indicate. So why do we have a base? Surely we should just get rid of that bit. But anyway, we're doing more maths than we need. That's the thing I'm telling you, if you hadn't already realised from all the things that I've just read to you from the rulebook. Let's continue. For example, using the party from step 2, if we can remember that, those millions of numbers, you can build a medium encounter by making sure that the adjusted, not the actual, the adjusted XP value of the monsters is at least 550, the party's threshold for a medium encounter. Well, thanks for telling me that one sentence later. And no more than 825 XP, the party's threshold for a hard encounter. We've kind of covered this, but let's go back over it again. Maybe they didn't really get it and thought we probably didn't either. A single monster of challenge rating 3, such as a manticore or owlbear, is worth 700 XP. So one possibility. If you want a pair of monsters, each will cost 1.5 times its base XP value. We know, we've covered this already. They're doubling down. A pair of direwolves, for example, worth 200 XP each, have an adjusted value of 600. But we're not going to get 600 as the party, by the way. We're still only going to get the 400 XP. We're just increasing that for making the DM's life a misery. To assist with this approach, Appendix B presents a list of all monsters in the Monsters Manual organised by challenge rating. So look in your Monsters Manual for Appendix B and you'll see a list of them organised for you in challenge rating order. Very useful, definitely a big bonus. The Adventuring Day. This is that table they talked about earlier. Assuming typical adventuring conditions and average luck, most adventuring parties can handle about 6 to 8 medium or hard encounters in a day. That's a lot of maths for you to do, by the way. In the same way you figure out the difficulty of an encounter, you can use the XP values of monsters and other opponents in an adventure as a guideline for how far the party is likely to progress. For each character in the party, use the Adventuring Day XP table to estimate how much XP that character is expected to earn in a day. Add together the values of all party members to get a total of the party's Adventuring Day. This provides a rough estimate of the adjusted XP value for encounters the party can handle before the characters will need to take a long rest. Okay. Adventuring Day XP, the table to help us work out what on earth is going on at this point. Level 1, adjusted XP per day per character, 300. So we've got to go and do all that maths, and we've got to figure out all our numbers, and we've got to work out all the different XP volumes, and then we've got to apply some multipliers to those monsters and their XP values if we're using multiple monsters to give us totals, and we should be trying to gauge these adjusted figures that we're now having to create to then obviously try and fit into this table to see that we're not going to be pushing them too far and we're not going to be over-egging the pudding. Great. Surely we're nearly done. I think we are. To give you some numbers, 5th, adjusted XP per day per character of a 5th level character should be expecting around 3,500 a day from the adjusted pool, not the actual pool they're going to get. That could be less than it is going to be less if it's multiple monsters. If you're throwing lots of individual big monsters at them, then that would be correct. But again, we're having to do this adjusty maths to kind of recalculate and rejig everything all the time. Short rests. In general, over the course of a full adventuring day, the party will likely need to take 2 short rests, about 1/3 and 2/3 of the way through the day. Make sure your monsters know that. And your story and narrative knows that. Because, like the British Army, we take our tea breaks at 11 and at 2 in the afternoon. And the enemy better behave. That's not true. That's just me being silly. Modifying encounter difficulty. It's still going. Oh, right. Strap in. Modifying encounter difficulty. An encounter can be made easier or harder based on the choice of location and the situation. Increase the difficulty of the encounter by 1 step from easy to medium, for example, if the characters have a drawback that their enemies don't. Reduce the difficulty by 1 step if the characters have a benefit that their enemies don't. Any additional benefit or drawback pushes the encounter 1 step in the appropriate direction. If the characters have both a benefit and a drawback, the two cancel each other out. Situational drawbacks include the following. The whole party is surprised. Boo! I was surprised. We were surprised. I was very surprised. The enemy has cover and the party doesn't. The characters are unable to see the enemy. That's quite a big disadvantage in the grand scheme of things. The characters are taking damage every round from some environmental effect, that's easy for me to say, or magical source, and the enemy isn't. What a git. The characters are hanging from a rope in the midst of scaling a sheer wall or cliff, stuck to the floor, or otherwise in a situation that greatly hinders their mobility or makes them sitting ducks. Now, to be brutally honest with you, sitting ducks and massively decreased mobility, right, that's probably more than 1 step of difficulty. If you are fighting something that can big alpha damage and you can't move away from it, you're going to die. So, as a, watch that one. That's a killer. And then we go on to fun combat encounters. The following features can add more fun and suspense to a combat encounter. Terrain features that pose inherent risks to both characters and their enemies, such as a frayed rope bridge, pools of green slime. Maybe people don't like green slime. Give it some environmental damage is actually what they're saying there, to be fair. They haven't said it, but that is exactly what they mean. Terrain features that provide a change of elevation, such as pits, stacks of empty crates, ledges, balconies. Features that either inspire or force characters and their enemies to move around, such as chandeliers, kegs of gunpowder or oil, and whirling blade traps. I'm not entirely sure why a chandelier would cause me, inspire or force me to move, unless I'm Errol Flynn and I feel like swinging from one. But yeah, there you go. And then we move on to random encounters and how we deploy random encounters. But I'm not going to count that because that is more about story pacing and adventure tone setting for an environment, and that's not a typical encounter rule. So that was 5e's how you build step by step encounters for your party as a games master. I used many, many, many words, and there was lots of maths, and I was having to do multiple different things to get a result, several steps to get one result, and I'm having to compare 3-4 tables during that process to make sure that I'm building a balanced encounter. So the opinions I'm about to tell you are my opinions. They are opinions that are voiced in the D&D 5e community, namely by very experienced published authors such as Sly Flourish, an absolute GM, you know, he's great. Genuinely, hands down, a brilliant guy. Love him, right? He and several people he's had on his podcasts, including, I believe, but don't quote me on this, James Introcaso, have all had a bit of a moan about encounter building in 5e, because I'm not being funny, but if I wasn't an experienced GM, my brain is already a little bit melted after that endeavor, and if you're new, you've got a serious, hill to climb. Now, I do believe that in one of the official books, there is actually a completely revised set of encounter building rules released by Wizards of the Coast, which also tells you a lot about how they feel those have gone down with the community. That's, again, a fact. It's not me going, I don't like them, they're bad. They're not bad. I don't think they're bad. I do think they're very crunchy indeed. I'm doing lots of maths to get results, and I'm then having to do more maths after that to then get the actual result I need. Why am I doing that? That doesn't make sense to me. It was very similar in 3.5. I GM'd a lot of 3.5. I played a lot of 3.5. It was very similar, and yes, crunchy. 5e is crunchy. Anyway, moving on before people literally explode to 2e. Now, I'm sure many 5e watchers at this point are rubbing their hands together and thinking, ha ha ha, now 5e will be made to look like a god. And we're going to jump right over to my copy of the Pathfinder 2 rulebook. Now, I had to use the Dungeon Master's Guide in 5e to get the encounter building rules. So if I've only got the Player's Handbook, I haven't got them. I have to have the Dungeon Master's Guide. Little chalk up for 2e, if you buy the Pathfinder 2e core rulebook, it has all the rules your players need and all the rules you need as a GM. It's one book, it's not 2 books. Happy days. So, here we go. Are you ready? It's going to take at least another 3 hours to... Oh, wait, no, it's not. The most common type of encounter is a combat encounter. Well done. I'm reading directly from the book again. I still will be flippant, though. Where the PCs face other creatures. Funny that. Combat encounters are strictly governed by rules. The guidelines that follow will help you build combat encounters that pose appropriate challenges for your group. Building hazard encounters work the same way. Social encounters are more freeform and are up to you as a GM to design. What's that? You can do something freeform as a GM in Pathfinder 2, but it says you can't on Reddit. Anyway, moving on. To build a combat encounter, first decide how the encounter fits into the adventure as a whole, then estimate how much of a threat you want the encounter to pose using one of 5 categories below. Very similar in format here. Trivial threat, and that's probably them basically kind of taking easy as an option. Trivial threat encounters are so easy that the characters have essentially no chance of losing. They shouldn't even need to spend significant resources unless they are particularly wasteful. These encounters work best as warm-ups, palate cleansers, or reminders of how awesome the characters are. A trivial threat encounter can still be fun to play, so don't ignore them just because of the lack of threat. Basically, it's a brilliant way to do your first encounter of a campaign, or to after maybe a combat where they took a bit of a beating and feel a bit down about themselves, throw them a curveball that they can deal with nice and easily and kind of go, okay, actually maybe it's not so bad. But really, this is where we start getting into encounters that you're going to use more often. Low threat. Encounters present a veneer of difficulty and typically use some of the party's resources. However, it would be rare or the result of very poor tactics. Note the word tactics. You have to use them. Otherwise, you're stupid. For the entire party to be seriously threatened. Nice. Jobbed. Moderate threat. Encounters are a serious challenge to the characters, though unlikely to overpower them completely. Characters usually need to use sound tactics. There's the T word again. And manage their resources wisely to come out of a moderate threat encounter ready to continue on and face a harder challenge without resting. Inspired. Severe threat encounters are the hardest encounters most groups of characters can consistently defeat. These encounters are most appropriate for important moments in your story. There we are, there's a bit of guidance on how we use them. We're deploying them as narrative tools. Such as confronting a final boss, bad luck, poor tactics, or lack of resources due to prior encounters can easily turn a severe threat encounter against the characters, and a wise group keeps the option to disengage open. That's right, you shouldn't expect to defeat everything you face when playing Big Boy League. And then we move on to Extreme Threat. Personal favourite of mine. I use them every session, multiple times. No, I don't at all. They're absurd, and you'll see why. Encounters are so dangerous that they are likely to be even a match for the characters, particularly if the characters are low on resources. This makes them too challenging for most users. Why are they in the book? Well, an extreme threat encounter might be appropriate for a fully rested group of characters that can go all out for the climactic encounter at the end of an entire campaign. Boom. Right, okay, so that's where we use it. Good, thanks for that. Or for a group of veteran players using advanced tactics and teamwork, aka the min-max cheesemonger tactic squad from hell. But there's plenty of people who love playing like that, and this is really kind of where they come into their own, because they'll be able to go, yeah, I dealt with 2 extreme encounters in 1 session, and you died in a severe because you're a noob. We've all met them. They're chads, and they love it. We move on to XP budget. Another XP budget. No! Why do they tax us with these budgets? Yes, right, you're going to spend your life doing budgets and printouts and tax returns as a DM for the rest of your life. Anyway, XP budget. Once you've selected a threat level based on, obviously, low, well, yeah, easy, extreme, don't use extreme. XP budget. Once you've selected a threat level, it's time to build the encounter. Good, because I was getting bored, just like I was in 5e. You have an XP budget based on the threat for each creature costs some of that budget. Start with the monsters or NPCs that are most important to the encounter, then decide how you want to use the rest of your XP budget. Many encounters won't match the XP budget exactly, but they should come close. The XP budget, they're always getting away with fudging numbers, aren't they? 5e's fudging, 2e's fudging. Oh, it's the GM's fault, it's not our fault. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, the XP budget is based on a group of 4 characters. If your group is larger or smaller, see different party sizes below. That's it. Choosing creatures. In all but the most unusual circumstances, you'll select creatures for your encounter that range from 4 levels lower than the PC's level to 4 levels higher than the PC's level. What? There's no challenge rating system with obscure numbers and random ever-increasing amounts of XP totals? Yes, that's correct. There isn't. What's the party's level? Then you look at the monster's level. That's it. it's not an abstract process now, challenge rating. In 2E, it's very simple. The monster has a level, and that level is its level. So let's say an orc is level 3, and you're a level 1 player. That is, well, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? It's 2 higher than your level, because 1, 2, 3, easy peasy. And that would put it into a threat range that we'll see on the table opposite. So we're reading on. In all but the most unusual circumstances, you'll select creatures for your encounter that range from 4 levels higher to 4 levels lower than the PC's level. Creature XP and roll is a table that we're going to refer to in a moment. There's one table just on the right here. We're not quite as many as 5e yet, but I'm sure we're still counting. Let's see where we go. Each creature has a part to play in your encounter, from a lowly lackey to a boss so mighty it could defeat the entire party single-handedly. Good times. 5 of those, please. Each creature costs some of the XP from your XP budget. For the encounter, based on its level compared to the level of the characters in your party. For instance, if the PCs are 5th level, a 2nd level creature is 3 levels lower, making it a lackey, and appropriate for a low to moderate threat encounter, and it costs 15 XP in an encounter's XP budget. Party level is explained in detail on page 508, and when they say it's in detail, it's like a paragraph, because it's like, are they level 2? That's their party level. Now, different party sizes. For each additional character in the party beyond the 4th, increase your XP budget by the amount shown on the table opposite. Encounter budget. If you have fewer than 4 characters, use the same process in reverse. Imagine that. For each missing character, remove the amount of XP from your XP budget. Note that if you adjust your XP budget to account for party size, the XP awards for the encounter don't change. You'll always award the amount of XP listed for a group of 4 characters. We're actually getting the XP we're being told we're going to get. Happy days. That's a win in my book. It's best to use the XP increase from more characters to add more enemies or hazards, and the XP decrease from, gotta scroll up, oh, I went too far. Fewer characters to subtract enemies and hazards rather than making one enemy tougher or weaker. Encounters are typically more satisfying if the number of enemy creatures is fairly close to the number of player characters. That's it. That's the entirety of the 2E guidance on encounters. And then we literally have a wonderful table. Both tables that you need are on the same page and directly above each other. They're not on across the 3 pages that we were just reading in the 5E core rulebook. It's one page. I just have one page open and I look at the 2 tables and I go, my encounter budget for a trivial threat fight is 40 or less. That's my total XP budget. And then I go below it and I look at the creature and roll. Again, we have this narrative element to our encounter design here. Party level -4. So a monster that is 4 levels lower than the party. So a 5th level party as an average party level. A level 1 monster, because that's what they are. It's just level 1. Now, you could use the word challenge rating there if you wanted, but challenge rating is an abstract, complicated mathematical equation. I'm literally just looking at the level of the monster, and I'm looking at it and going, a goblin is level 1, and it's 4 levels lower than my 5th level party, so it's worth 10 XP. And if I want a trivial threat encounter for my level 5 party, I can throw 4 goblins at them for just a really kind of throwaway goblins being massacred. Or I could push that and say, I want a moderate fight, but I want to use these goblins. So I'm going to throw 8 goblins at them for a total of 80 XP in the budget, which is a moderate fight, which still isn't going to be absolutely life and death, but is going to be a bit challenging and a bit dramatic. That's it. That's me working out how to create an encounter in 2E. It's a little less crunchy. It's a lot less crunchy. Perhaps when it comes to encounter building, 5E is considerably crunchier than 2E. I say apparently. It clearly is. It's just a fact. I'm dealing with multiple pages. I'm doing multiple maths. I'm looking at multiple tables in 5E, whereas in 2E, I'm literally looking at one page and going, what's the monster's level? What's the party level? How many higher or lower? That's my budget. Take it off. That's what I award at the end. And leveling up is also super easy because I'm just totaling them up to 1000 XP. And once they hit 1000 XP, they level. And then I just reset it back to 0, carry over any remaining XP that kind of tipped them over. So if they went up to 1080, they start at level, say, 1 to 2. They've now got 80 XP into level 2. Easy peasy. I'm never having to do complicated maths. I'm not having to do any maths, really. I'm just using very simple numbers that don't go higher than 160 and don't go higher than 160 because an extreme XP budget for an encounter is 160 and an extreme threat or solo boss is the party level plus 4 and he's worth 160 XP. That's it. So, congratulations. We have categorically been able to crown Pathfinder 2E the uncrunchiest of the numbers and E's on the end systems in the world when it comes to encounter building. Mission accomplished. So if you are getting bogged down in 5E's horrendously complicated and massively boring and laborious encounter creation rules with random numbers and multiplications for no reason to get numbers that you should really have gotten the first time you did some maths, but now you have to do more maths to get the numbers that you need for actual maths to make the actual budget that you had to do loads of other stuff for. Before you did that, switch to Pathfinder 2E. The encounters are loads easier to build. And if you're a 2E GM or player who keeps saying, I find 2E too difficult, maybe you need to reread the very small and unlaborious volume of text in the Pathfinder 2E book and focus your attentions on trivial, low, and moderate. Severe is an end of like story, an end of set piece boss. You shouldn't be using multiple severes in your encounters. This is directly at the 2E community now. You just shouldn't. And you should only be using extreme encounters in really extreme circumstances, like the absolute pinnacle ending of a campaign, where they've got all the tools necessary to take on the super bad because they've gone around the world and gathered up the 5 rings of smitey death and the sword of stabby stabby killy killy, famous magic items. I think we can all agree. And they're at full health with all their spells and and loads of potions and loads of magic items. That's when you use extreme. Steer clear of severe. Stick with your moderate. Stick with your lows. Throw in some trivials for fun, and enjoy it. It's not too difficult unless you aren't reading the rules. So I feel I've been equally just and possibly a little bit sarcastic and mean to both the 2E and the 5E community in equal measure. There are areas where 5E will be less crunchy than 2E, but for a really massive, humongously important part of your life as a GM, 2E is way less complicated than 5E. This is a fact. And for me, as a lifetime GM, that's a real deal breaker on 5e. A real deal breaker. So don't sleep on 2e. Just tell your friends that the 5's fallen over and become looking a bit like a 2 and play. And don't look back because it's easier. And maybe a bit better. Anyway, stay safe, stay classy, and I will see you on the next 2e versus 5e Battle of the Crunchiest video. Probably sometime next week. Peace!